lights out for me. Hey folks, my name is Matt Summerfield and I am the senior pastor of Zeo Church, and just want to welcome you to the second in a series that we're doing between now and early December, Living Well in Pandemic Times, because we know we are living in crazy times. I'm resisting the urge to say unprecedented because we're all so weary of that word. And let's face it, in many ways, we are just weary. Here we are in the midst of another lockdown, and this whole COVID situation has put us under so many different pressures. Last week, I interviewed Dr. Kate Middleton, and we talked about our emotional health and how we can be emotionally healthy. Do catch that video. It's still available on the YouTube channel. And today we're going to be talking about marriage and relationships, and how this current situation we find ourselves in is hugely amplifying some of the challenges in our relationships and marriages, because like we're literally living together maybe in a way that we never have. Some of you will know that in February this year I got married, and Amy and I literally spent the first 6 months of our relationship with each other like 24/7 together, and that's either going to make or break you. Thankfully, we navigated it well with some help from some good friends to support us too. But a friend of ours said, Matt, maybe you've probably spent more time together in your first 3 or 4 months than we did in our first 2 years, and that may be true. But that's become true for all of us. Like, we've been working from home, we've been not allowed to go out very much, and of course that inevitably puts great pressure on our relationships. What are some of those pressures, and how can we deal with them? How can we handle them? Well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a fantastic couple who've been a great support to me and to Amy. This is Juliet and Keith Johnson. They're from Soul Survivor Church, and we are looking forward to getting their wisdom, because amongst the many things that they do, they help with marriages and marriage coaching and the like. But I'll let them explain this for themselves. So Julie, Keith, introduce yourselves, tell us about you, and yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Great. Matt, thank you very much. And it's fantastic to be with you, to the extent we call this being with you nowadays, and to be online with all of you guys. Brilliant. And so, yeah, as Matt says, we are Keith and Juliet Johnson, and we're based at the Soul Survivor Church near Watford. And we have been married for 37 years. I know that we only look like we're 27.
Well, I was going to say 28 personally, but
yeah, I've been married for 37 years. We have 4 sons who are now grown up in their 20s and in their 30s. Challenge for us in lockdown has been that we have 2 sons around the world, one in Sydney and one in Canada, who we haven't seen for a year, and who knows when we'll see them again. And we have lived most of our early married life in London. We spent a few years actually living in Australia as part of a move with my work. And then we came back to the UK in 2003 and have been part of the Soul Survivor Church in Watford ever since then. We met at university here in the UK in Southampton. And we were part of the Christian Union there at university. And so for us, through the whole of that 37 years of our journey in marriage, faith has been an important part of our lives. We have done our best to try and be followers of Jesus through that time. And so that's very interwoven into our story and how we've navigated it.
Yeah. And looking back, we can really see actually that we've sort of been involved in supporting couples for the whole of our married life. I mean, it's been a mutual thing with people who were at the same sort of stage as us, or a bit further ahead when we were first married. But over time, we've done more and more, and we've run lots of courses, you know, pre-marriage courses and the marriage course and that sort of thing. And I think we became really aware that we wanted to be able to help people more. So, because we're both a bit nerdy and like that, we studied relationships and we did a lot of training as coaches and training in relationship health and things like that. And it confirmed, I suppose, what we already knew, that great relationships don't just happen, we build them.
Yes.
And we can build them. And so now we do a lot of work, couple to couple, so 2 on 2, working with couples to help grow and develop their relationships.
Yeah, and so over the last few years, in one form or another, we've worked with hundreds of couples, and we see that we all face similar challenges. In some ways, what we face as couples is the same, and yet it's also different, because the other thing that we see is that we're all unique, we're all different, and therefore our relationships are all unique and different. Your relationship will never be the same as someone else's. And I think the thing that is passionate in us is that we see that for so many of us, having a lifelong relationship that lasts is maybe the thing we want more than anything else in our whole lives. And yet sometimes it feels like the hardest thing we ever do. And how do we find help to build that and sustain it? But we know from research that there are things that are common to relationships that thrive and last. There are things we can learn. And some of the training that Juliet mentioned that we've done has been with people who've been studying relationships for 40 years and have seen what it takes to build relationships that really last. And so we have come to see that it's never too late to invest in our relationships. Wherever we feel we are, good, bad, or in the middle, there's always a possibility to move forward, to grow, and to change. And so we have had huge privilege really over the years in seeing couples make enormous progress, couples come back from seemingly dire situations on the brink of divorce, where they've been able to build and flourish in their relationships again. So as challenging as we know relationships can be, we have truly become believers in hope. Yes. There is hope, there is a future, there is always possibility for us.
Yeah. I think for me, there's an image that stays in my mind. Just before we got married, I got terrible cold feet and thought, oh my goodness, I'm completely nuts. What am I doing getting married at 21 and all this stuff? And I remember walking along the street to my student digs and just having this image in my mind, and this thought went through my mind. If life is an adventure, then who do I want to go on an adventure with? I want someone who's got skills, who's got talents, who's better at the things that I'm weak at. And I thought, well, Keith's a foot taller than me, so he could definitely see further ahead. So I thought, actually, he's the person I want to go on an adventure with. And I think we've had that view the whole of our married life. We recognize on adventures, you face challenges. And sometimes one of us has to lead, and sometimes it's teamwork.
Yeah.
It's how we do it.
So that's us.
Amazing. Well, I'm so pleased that we've got this time together. And already, I think, I just want to underline some of those things that you've said. Just a reminder to all of us that, again, great relationships don't happen by chance. We are intentional. We build them. And love that thing that you said, Keith, about it's never too late. If you're watching this right now and you're just thinking maybe it's too late, we are hoping and praying that you will find some hope amongst the practical help that we're going to give, and that will leave you at the end, even of this half an hour or so that we've got, thinking maybe it's not too late. Maybe there is a chance. And if you're not in that position, if you feel like, actually, you know what, our relationship's healthy, then we hope this conversation today is going to help it grow from strength to strength. So there'll be something for everyone today. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at 6 scenarios, 6 areas, maybe 6 things that couples may be feeling right now in their relationships, and hear from Juliet and Keith to reflect on those. And the first is this. Maybe this is you. Maybe you're a couple right now thinking, you know what, up until COVID hit, we thought we were doing okay. We thought our marriage was all right. But now, like lockdown, we've been living in and out each other's pockets. We're working together, all of that stuff. And now it feels like our marriage is in trouble, and we never expected this to happen to us. I'm sure some people are feeling that. What would you say to those people today?
Yeah, that's a really common one. I think we've felt it a bit ourselves, actually, at times in this period. I think we have to recognize that this is a tough time. Kate, I watched Kate last week, and she was talking about how when we're stressed, our brains go into this catastrophe mode. Everything becomes black or white. And this is what happens with us in our relationships. We start to allow the pressure of everybody's feeling, because it's in our culture, to be focused on our poor partner. So that low level of anxiety that is building starts to make us see everything black and white. Our brains are more negatively wired, so we pick up on the black rather than the white, which means Keith gets it in the neck from me the next time he leaves his cup on the side and doesn't put it in the dishwasher, and that's it. Our marriage is obviously down the pan. Well, it's just not true. So we need to stand back, normalize, cut each other a bit of slack, and recognize that we're probably over emphasizing the negatives. What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it, not to take what you're experiencing now and assume this is now an indication of forever. Because, you know, let's not get into vaccines or anything else, but this is not normal. It isn't normal. And the things we're experiencing are not normal. They are strange times, and we have to put them in that context, I think, and see that we will come through this, whether it's weeks or months, none of us know how long, and to just be able to step back and recognize that everything that's been good hasn't gone. It's all still there, and we have got resourcefulness in ourselves to get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, maybe there are people listening and they're thinking like, oh, maybe this will never happen. I didn't think this would happen to me, and now I'm struggling. And again, we just want to say to people like, you're in good company.
Yeah.
You know, you're in good company. Like, don't, you know, we often look at other relationships, don't we? Think, oh, they probably never argue, they've got it together. But actually, we all battle, and what COVID has done is amplified that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so in this moment, we just kind of want to say, hey, you're in good company. This, like, marriage and relationships can be hard at any time. This is an especially hard time. And I remember a quote once where someone said, "Don't make permanent decisions during temporary setbacks." Permanent decisions during temporary setbacks. You know, we're going to ride this wave, come out the other side, hold on, hopefully applying some of the advice that we're going to continue to think through. But as we think about feelings, again, I know I've heard myself, a number of people saying this whole COVID environment in our second scenario, like, my emotions are all over the place. Like, you know, again, I thought I was, you know, fairly stable in my emotions, but again, this is bringing out all manner of emotions. And because of that, the overflow in terms of how I behave and things that I think and things I say even to my partner, sometimes that's not coming out too well. That's not playing out so well, or I'm being very quiet, or you know, I feel like an emotional roller coaster, and that is impacting my relationship. What would you guys say to someone who's kind of battling with the emotional highs and lows and all that?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right, Matt, aren't you? That all of us have probably experienced an emotional journey that maybe we've never experienced before. I know for myself, for me, during the first few months of lockdown back in the spring, I found that for some reason I wasn't sleeping very well. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I didn't even really know why. And I think not only are we suffering a lot of emotions that are difficult, sometimes we don't even know what they are. We just are conscious of the fact there's a sort of turmoil going on inside us, and we're not even sure what it is. And that can be difficult enough to navigate just as an individual, let alone the impact it has on our relationships. And I think the first thing that this forces us to do is to learn to be better communicators with our partners about our emotions. And let's face it, some of us who are a bit British are not always very good at communicating our emotions. Now is a time when we're going to have to learn to better communicate our emotions, to really express to our partner what it is that we're feeling. And for some of us, that means the first thing we've got to do is figure out what we're feeling ourselves and articulate it to ourselves. I can't tell Juliet what I'm feeling unless I can put some words to it. And I think it's so important that we do that, because when we experience emotions that disturb us, it can make us feel very alone, can't it? It feels like, well, I'm in my own thoughts. And if we can communicate more effectively our emotions and how we feel to our partner, we can build empathy. We can build that sense of, you actually get me, you understand me. I can see now that you can see what I'm feeling. You see the world through my eyes. You can stand in my shoes, and I can do the same for you. And even though our partner may not be able to give us any help with our emotions, just the fact that I'm not in them together on my own, but now together, makes it feel safer than it did before. And I think to be able to do that, there are some things that we have to learn that many of us, I know including me, are not very good at. So to be able to communicate our emotions to each other well, we have to slow down when we talk. We have to listen better. In fact, I think we need in this time to become great listeners, better listeners than we've ever been. We need to learn to listen to each other's hearts, not just each other's words. So when Juliet talks, I need to be listening for the feelings, if you like, that are underneath those words. And listening well takes effort, because it means if I'm going to listen well to Juliet, I've got to be able to put aside my own thoughts. I've got to be able to put aside my own solutions, my own answers, all those clever responses that I've got well rehearsed in my head. I've got to set them all aside and just listen. One of the things that Juliet and I sometimes teach the couples that we work with is a very, very simple thing that we call the emotion equation. And it's a way of just articulating your feelings to your partner in one simple sentence. And it goes a bit like this. You just say to them, you say, I feel, and then you name an emotion. I feel sad. I feel anxious. I feel depressed. I feel concerned, whatever it is. And then you say when, and you describe the situation. I felt really anxious when someone else at work got made redundant. And then you say because, and that forces us to go a bit deeper. I might say, well, I felt really anxious when someone else at work was made redundant because I've been a bit worried about whether my job's really secure. And then at the end, you say, I want. So we state a positive desire. And I might just say, I really want to keep this job because I love it. Or I might say something to Juliet that I want. I might just say, I really want you to support me in what's going on at the moment. And I've now been able to articulate something to Juliet that's quite deep and quite important, but in a simple, short sentence. And I think as we start to communicate and hear each other's emotions and how we're feeling, we build that sense of togetherness, of empathy, of I'm not alone, somebody gets me.
Keith, can you just underline those 4 things again? That was so good. You know, if people are making notes, that's such a helpful framework to have a conversation from the heart. So again, just give that.
Right. So if you've got a bit of paper, you say, I feel, and then you name an emotion. When, and then you describe a situation. Because, and then you describe your underlying reason. I want, or I need. And then you say something that's a positive need that you have, a positive desire that will help you.
Yeah, it's really useful. And I think, you know, some of the things that perhaps the listening bit that we might not realize that we do is this. You're talking to me and I'm, oh, yeah. When we listen, we need to give our full attention.
Yeah, I've never done that.
Have you never?
No.
You're amazing.
My wife's in the background and I can feel the daggers. But listen, let me just ask another question though on this. Like, these are big conversations that you're encouraging us to have. They're honest, heartfelt conversations. Is there a time and a place for those kind of conversations? Like, how do couples make space for that? Like, you know, in the heat, is it in the heat of the moment sometimes, or like what do you recommend to couples to get into the habit of having honest heart conversations? Wisdom around that?
Sure. I think there's 2 different things here for me. I don't know what Juliet thinks. First of all, I think the great thing about that emotion equation is it means we can sometimes communicate important things quite quickly. So when you just have a moment, And so I might have said to Juliet, after I finish my last Zoom call of the day, I feel really anxious because someone else at work has been made redundant and I'm worried about my job. I really need some support now. So that took me about 30 seconds to say.
Yes.
Now, what's the response I need from Juliet in the minute? Well, probably, do you know what? I need a hug and for her to say, thank you, it's all right. Now, it might be that later on after dinner, when the kids are in bed, there's a bigger unpacking conversation, but I'm going to feel just a bit less alone because we just touched and connected in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's good, you know, if you have a moment like that, not only to affirm the other person, you know, but to say, would you like to talk about this more? Shall we sit down later tonight? Because you may not want to talk about it anymore. That may be enough. That's the other thing. I think we assume that we know what the other person is thinking. So we don't actually say, I want to talk about this. Can we find a time?
Yeah, okay.
You do that with a friend,
yes.
But when it's your other half and you're in the house all day together, maybe you assume that actually that they can mind read.
Yeah.
And we can't.
So important, isn't it? And in stressful times, we found that we are very, very explicit about what we need and what we want. So as Juliet says, if you want to talk about it, you say, could we talk about this later? Or if you don't, you say you don't. Or you say, when would be good for you to have a bigger talk about this?
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and find out. So don't assume.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's so good. Guys, I want to jump on to scenario 3 now. And I know this is one that Amy and I would probably say has come up now and again, which is just because we're living in each other's pockets, because we're together all the time, we're just finding each other a bit irritating from time to time. We're getting on each other's nerves. I mean, like even this afternoon, we were doing some stuff in the garden and Amy was doing her thing. And I made a little suggestion about like how perhaps she wanted to do what she was doing differently. And to my surprise, she didn't appreciate that advice.
Really?
True. She didn't say,
I was shocked.
Thank you for your advice.
No. She told me in no uncertain terms that she had a job and she was doing it and she did it great. And I've got to be kind. She was in the room. And but like we're not unique. Like we know that people have been irritated with each other. We're, as I said, like because of the scenario that we're in. So for those that are thinking like, oh, is there something wrong? Like we're finding each other more and more annoying than usual, or maybe we do anyway. There's a lot of irritation in our relationship. What would you say to those who are, at the moment are a little bit worried? Wow, I'm just finding myself really annoyed or irritated by my partner.
I do know that's very common. And I think it goes back to this thing that we talked right about at the very beginning, about how we get irritated and then all you ever see are the things that irritate you. Mm-hmm. So the counter to that is actually affirmation and appreciation. This is one of the foundations of a great relationship. We look for the positives. And as we mentioned at the beginning, Keith and I were Christians when we got married, and faith has been really important in our married life to us. And people probably will have heard some of these Bible passages that I want to mention now, because they're ones that are often read at weddings. There's a wonderful one that comes in a letter from the Apostle Paul to the Corinthians talking about love. And it's in 1 Corinthians 13. And it says this: love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, it doesn't dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Well, if you can't remember all of those, maybe you could remember 3. Love is patient, it is kind, and it keeps no record of wrongs. If we can be patient and be kind and keep no record of wrongs, we will go a long way to actually build a positive atmosphere in our relationship. And then the second one really is to be able to notice and affirm in the other person, make a point of not thinking it, but actually saying it. living together, we can lose the general kindnesses and civility, to use an old-fashioned word, that we would use around our friends. We stop saying please and thank you. We make demands. We don't ask, we make demands. We don't say, would you mind or would you like? We tell the person what to do. Maybe that happened in the garden. No, there. Anyway,
it's good for the soul.
But it's really, really important, and that we voice the things that we appreciate. You know, I was on a call the other day, a Zoom call, and Keith appeared in my office with a cup of tea. It was really great because I was sitting there thinking, I could really do with a cup of tea. You know, I've been on an umpteenth Zoom call. Well, making a point of saying to him afterwards, thank you so much, I really appreciated that. It's just good for us. And it counteracts the negative that you may have left the things out on the side.
Yeah.
You know, but it's really practical. And then the other thing is about dealing with what's in your mind. Because when you're irritated, what happens is you start to tell yourself a story. And the story goes, he always, or he never. And it is just not true. Because none of us are that consistent, frankly. But if you find yourself thinking those things and clocking up this list of misdemeanors that your partner has committed, then you can know that you're falling into the trap of a negative mindset. And you need to put some work into looking for the positives, which is the other thing that Paul encourages us to do in a different letter in the New Testament. He tells us that we should think about those things that are good, that are lovely, and that are admirable. And we should do that about our partners. And I try very hard to do that about Keith. I will confess that I have my list of misdemeanors that seems to pop out however hard I try. But you seem to do a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. I have a good one too. Yeah, I think this is so important. The point that Juliet mentions about how all of us write a story in our heads about the other person. And it's so easy to write a negative story. And once we write a negative story, we get what psychologists call confirmation bias. If I've decided that Juliet is always late, then I will notice every time she's late and not notice every time she's on time. I will merely reinforce my negativity. There's a lovely little exercise we sometimes give couples who we work with. People might want to have a go at this. And we say, the last thing you say to each other at night before you go to sleep is 3 things that you have appreciated about your partner that day. They could be 3 things you've noticed or 3 things you've thought about, but 3 positive things that you share with each other. The last thing you do, it helps us to start to write a different story in our heads. And if you think it's not too tricky, we give you a little bonus, which is see if you can do it for a week and no repeats.
Yeah, so you should have 21 things. We had a lovely time. Actually, it was a lovely couple who were really been struggling, and they did this exercise. And we said, well, how did you get on? And she said to him, I never knew you noticed all those things about me. And she said, it made me feel so good. And they both agreed it had changed the atmosphere between them. It's a little thing. It's little things that we change that make big differences.
Yeah.
Amazing. But let me just push a little bit more on this one though. Like, because clearly sometimes maybe our partner's doing something that irritates us. And as you say, we need to challenge our negative thinking and our confirmation bias and relax, shake it off. But are there times though, maybe when we do need to challenge and speak to our partner about certain things, perhaps using the technique that you explained about how we're feeling and those kind of things? Like, how do we, for people who are battling with irritation, like, what's the wisdom in terms of knowing this is worth speaking about versus actually, come on, you need to do the internal work and just let this go? You know, like any wisdom around that as people are listening to this, and maybe they're thinking like, well, but some of the things that my partner does literally feel bad. Like it's not just dropping the tea, you know, or what have you. Like, any wisdom on that in terms of when we should say something, when we shouldn't?
Well, I do think that it's, you know, we're each different. So you will know whether this is an absolute deal breaker for you or not. And then I think as the equation, the emotion equation that Keith talked about earlier is a great one to say, you know, I want to talk to you about this. This is a bit of a tricky subject, but please will you listen to what I've got to say? Because that then gives you the opportunity to explain what's happening, and you don't use you statements. You try and depersonalize it, because as soon as I say, you know, I feel upset because you leave your cups on the side in the kitchen, Keith will become defensive. If I say, I feel upset when I come into the kitchen and it's in a bit of a mess, then he has a chance to think, oh yeah, that can't be very nice when you're about to try and cook dinner or whatever it is you're going to do. So those, again, little things can really help.
Yeah, I think, as Juliet says, this is as much about how we speak to each other as whether. I think it's not just should I raise this, but how I raise it.
Yeah,
I think the way we speak to each other can transform the conversation.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we need to get away from the you always, you never, I'm so fed up with you, all of that stuff, which, let's face it, we've all done. And we need to get to the owning our own stuff, if you like, which is, you know, I find it really frustrating when I come down in the morning and the kitchen's a mess, because it makes me feel like I've got a lot of work to do before I can start my day.
Yes.
You are going to have a more constructive conversation if you say that than if you say, I'm so fed up because you always leave your stuff lying around. Yeah.
So
I think how we do it is important as much as when.
So there's a learning here, isn't it, about learning to respond and not react.
Yes.
To be more thoughtful in the words that we use. We all know that words are powerful. You know, one of the biggest lies we were told when we grew up was like, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. We know the opposite of that is true, that words live in us, they live in us. And so in our relationships, if we're going to have an important conversation, then we, like you're saying, we need to think about the words that we're using.
Yes.
Words can either put a lid on something or crush someone, or they can open the door for healing and possibility. And so,
And the other thing is to really make sure that you stick to one issue. You know, because otherwise, what you find is, you know, the messy kitchen becomes. You never fill the car up with petrol. You're always late. Your mother is just such a pain. You know, and before you know where you are, you're on to something like the US election. And how did we get onto global warming? You know, and how's it my fault? So absolutely making sure that when you decide to talk about an issue, you stay on the issue.
That's great. Thanks, Juliet. Well, listen, let's move into scenario 4. And this is again, when it comes to finances, we know again that finances are a massive pressure, again, in general, in relationships, and you know, how people are managing their money or you know, the money pressures they feel. In fact, you know, we know this is so important. In 2 weeks' time, we're specifically having an evening, Living Well in the Pandemic, about money and the challenges.
Right.
But we know this is a marital pressure where, you know, people are worried about losing their job or have lost their job. And so money pressures, financial pressures, job pressures that people are feeling at the moment. Can you speak to that for us?
Well, I think they're great examples of the fact that in the middle of this pandemic, many people are experiencing lots of stress and anxiety from external, all sorts of things externally. And as you say, it might be finance or redundancy. They may be anxious about elderly parents or relatives who are sick, or you know, the kids have been off school for months and how are they doing? Lots and lots of external pressures. And I think the first thing about this is, to some extent, to just remember the things we've already said, which is, if I hold all that inside me, then I'm going to feel alone and stressed. And those things are actually going to come between Juliet and I and actually push us apart. Whereas if I can communicate to Juliet, and if she gives me time to speak and talk and share and unpack those things, even though maybe they're feelings I don't quite understand, that in itself will bring us closer. It'll feel like we're together facing these challenges rather than the challenges coming between us. So I think everything we talked about, sharing emotions, building empathy, listening, hearing, all of those things are super, super important. That itself will make us feel a bit more together in what we're doing. And I think when we do that, we're also able to sort of lower those emotion levels. And as we can lower those emotion levels, you might have talked about this previously with Kate, when we're in a heightened emotional state, we cannot think rationally. It just doesn't work. Our brain goes into a different zone. And as we build empathy and we bring a sense of emotional sharing, it helps us to actually work together in a creative way to think about the challenges we face. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is just to remember that there is no shame in asking for help. I mean, these are crazy times, and no one should feel the slightest bit embarrassed or ashamed about saying, I need some help. I need some help thinking about my money. I need some help figuring out how to care for my parents, or many, many other things. And I think these should be the very times when we reach out for help. And it might be we just reach out to friends and to other people in our community, or it may be in some times we need to reach out for more professional help in different ways and different situations. And I think we should be trying to, create a culture wherever we are that says it is okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of courage and commitment that you want to find solutions to things. And I think the third thing is, in a sense, it's a bit of a repeat, and that is, of course, we have to face up to the many challenges that will be coming our way. At the same time, if we can keep a heart of gratitude for the things that are good in our lives, that will help to bring context and balance. And I think it's so important that we are very explicit about being grateful for the small positive things that we have in our lives, and we all have some, that will help us to bring balance to the things that are our challenge. We mentioned right at the very beginning, we have a son and his wife, and we have 2 grandchildren who live in Australia. So we haven't seen our grandchildren for a year, and for all we know, we won't see them for another year. So that's kind of rubbish, all right?
Really is.
But you know what? We get to see them on FaceTime multiple times a week. So there are still things we can be grateful for in the midst of what is quite a grief, really, for us to miss that. And I think it's so important that we do that.
Yeah, gratitude, I think, is a really big thing. And it could be really small things, that can just change your mood. Stopping and being present in the moment and really savouring that hot cup of tea on a cold afternoon, and just thinking, oh gosh, this is lovely. I'm really grateful for this. It really does you good, and it helps you de-stress. Being present, focusing on the moment, looking for those positive things in your life. Yeah, the world's going to crazy, but actually here within our 4 walls, we've got food for tonight. We've got each other, and we're warm and dry and what have you. I know it sounds very basic and simple, but these are really important things, and we need to just practice that, our heart of gratitude. And the great thing about it is it's contagious. Once you start noticing things that you're grateful for, you start noticing more. And that's a really positive thing.
Absolutely. And we, again, really want to encourage all of us to kind of adopt
Yeah.
Gratitude, I think, is such an important thing. And again, I just want to underline something, Keith, that you said about maybe people watching this now and they find themselves in financial trouble or job trouble, whatever, and feeling shame and guilt, which is so crippling and so toxic. And again, we just want you to know, if you're watching this right now, that, like, again, the nature of this moment, like, don't allow this stuff to cripple you with blame or guilt and shame. Like, get help, get support, talk to your partner. Even in the last month or so, I've spoken to people, who've lost their job and they didn't tell their partner at first, and they were just, because they were ashamed, and they're like, I'm the provider in the house, and I'm not gonna, let this happen. And I understand that, that sense of responsibility, but the problem is sometimes our great strength can become our weakness, and it can become our undoing. And like, we've been brought together with another person, or, if you're not in a relationship, you've got friends, like, so important to have trust where we can just say, look, this is what I'm in. Can you help me, support me, cheer me on, give me some advice?
Yeah.
But I just want to underline to people today that if you find yourself in pain around finances and stuff, that is nothing to be ashamed of, and there is always a way through. And we'll talk more about this in a couple of weeks' time. But if you need some help or wisdom support in that area, please go even now to zeochurch.com/connect. zeochurch.com/connect. If you need some help or support in that area, you can put your details and we'll follow up with you.
Great.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Great. And Matt, I think just one quick follow on from that, which is implicit in what we've said so far, but maybe we should make it explicit. A lot of people in this season are, for the first time ever in their lives, are going to be struggling with mental health challenges. And we still live in a society that often feels a lot of shame about mental health challenges. And I think there'll be a lot of people who are feeling depressed, they're feeling anxious, and they're thinking to themselves, I've never been depressed ever in my life. I've never been. It's only weak people who get depressed and feel anxious. Oh my goodness, now it's happening to me.
Yeah.
And I think this is just truly a season for us to break the stigma of mental health challenges, and to just say to people that, believe me, right now, there is absolutely no shame in feeling anxious or depressed or other sort of mental health struggles, and to also just feel that you can reach out to people and share and ask for help, whether it's just with friends or more professionally. Really important.
Really important.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Okay, we're steaming through scenario 5. Couples who are feeling right now, families who are feeling right now, everything is a blur. Weekdays, weekends, we're home all the time. There's nothing to look forward to. The future is uncertain. It's all so unstable. It's all a blur. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, well, that sounds pretty depressing, doesn't it? Well, first of all, I think, there's lots that it was within our control to do something about this. And one of the big ones is about creating boundaries for yourself. If you're working from home and your kids are at home and, we're in lockdown, you can't go anywhere. Actually, it's really important that you set some boundaries between work time and home time, even if you're in the same place. And establish some little rituals for the end of work. Maybe at the end of work, you take 15 minutes and you just go and walk around the block and then come back in the house. Or you sit down with the newspaper for 15 minutes, or you listen to some music, or you read a novel, or you do something very different that marks the end of the day. And then actually you want to build some other things into the day that are, if you like, little rituals of what we would call rituals of connection. So how was your day? When you connect again in the evening, making sure that you sit down together and talk. Maybe the thing that Keith and I do, because we're stuck in this same loop as everybody else, we have Fun Friday.
Okay.
So Fun Friday, it marks the beginning of the weekend.
Okay.
On a fun Friday, we do something different in the evening. We might open a bottle of wine, we might watch something on TV, or we might I might
play a game, or
I might force Keith to do my jigsaw puzzle.
Do it.
If he's had enough to drink, he'll help. But but seriously, we try and change the sort of the rhythm and the feel of what that evening is like. We don't look at our emails, we put our phones aside, we're present. We might try and have a conversation about something interesting. Have you learned something new today? What made you smile? You know, those sorts of things, not talk about the negative stuff and actually talk about some of the positive stuff. What would you like to do if we could go and see our kids? You know, those sorts of things. We have sort of dreams conversations, and that's really important. So we set boundaries on our days. So we start and finish work. You know, we have little rituals for when we finish work. If people are working shifts, that makes it harder, but you could still do it and come in and have your getting together end of the day connection point, whatever that looks like for you on whatever time of day that is. And also, even if your weekend isn't the weekend, actually making sure that you have some things that you do differently. So you have a Saturday where you plan to do something that you wouldn't do on a weekday.
Yeah.
And you try and create those rhythms, because we need those rhythms and we need those downtimes.
Yeah.
And one lovely thing that we heard from someone was a great question to ask each other in the morning. What would be one thing that I could do for you today that would make your day better?
Wow, that's great.
Lovely, eh?
Yeah.
I think this thing about creating rituals of connection is very profound, because I think we've lived in a society, probably because we've watched too many movies, where we think that relationships and romance and connection and marriage are built around grand gestures. So the romantic honeymoon in the Caribbean, the expensive present, the fancy candlelit dinner, we think that's what makes amazingness in relationships. But actually, what we know from research is that the opposite is true.
Yeah.
That closeness and connection and specialness is actually built around tiny, tiny little rituals that we create. So the fact that in the morning we might make a cup of tea and say, tell me one thing that's coming up in your day. The fact that before we go to bed at night, we do our 3 appreciations. The fact that maybe on Saturday morning, we make pancakes with our kids. We walk the dog on a Sunday afternoon. These are actually the little rituals that create the fabric of life, that make it feel like our relationship is special and is different, and that actually creates connection and specialness, whether it's us as a couple or also with our children. So yeah, great thing to remember.
Yeah.
Love that. Obviously we're heading towards Christmas, and Amy and I have decided that in these weeks, we've done 2 so far, every Saturday we will visit a garden centre, because the garden centre is still open, and all the garden centres have a little Christmas exhibition, a little Christmas display.
Amazing.
Crazy Christmas fans. And so each Saturday, we've said every Saturday we're just going to go around, not necessarily obviously to buy anything, but just to enjoy, soak ourselves in the Christmas music and the lovely exhibitions, and just over the next 4 or 5 weeks, just to do that as something to look forward to and get us in the kind of Christmas mood. And like that, there are many other examples, but I love what you're saying in terms of, there's a thing here, isn't it? It's just about being intentional.
Yeah.
And you know, not allowing things to be blurred, but actually saying, no, we're going to put some structure, some rhythms, there are some things that we can do to look forward to that don't even cost money, and that we can enjoy doing together. So
yeah.
Let's move on to our last and closing scenario, which sadly, you know, I'm aware of is a real challenge, and you certainly will as well. For those who are watching right now and just think like, you know what, everyone else is coping and we really aren't. It feels like we're going under. Maybe it feels like it's too late. We are struggling. You know, it feels like life support machine of our relationships about to be turned off. like we feel like if this is you right now, like our hearts go out to you. If you're feeling that kind of feeling. Juliet, Keith, help us.
I think, I mean, it's super tough, isn't it? I mean, let's not downplay this in any way, but sometimes this can feel really, really difficult and challenging. And I think that we live in a society where there is still, and always has been, a lot of stigma in anyone who feels like their relationship or their marriage is not good. It's hard for anyone to admit that. And the first thing I think that's so important for us to say is you're not alone in this. You're just not, actually. It's just a lie. It just isn't true that you're alone in this, that lots of people are finding this tough. And this is a time above all when we have to absolutely get away from the curse of comparison.
Oh, yes.
Because of what I do professionally, I spend quite a lot of time on LinkedIn. And I honestly, if I read one more post on LinkedIn from someone who says, here are all the 10 great things about lockdown, I think I'll throw something at my computer, you know. And I'm, you know, it's the same, isn't it? And so we have to get away from comparison, because we know that most of what we read on social media isn't true, or it's only half the truth. Actually, you're not alone. And it just isn't true. And lots of people are struggling with this. And then I think the second thing that's profound is, if you can believe you're not alone, then don't be alone. So reach out and connect. And I think there is something about this season, this pandemic season, that has isolated us all. It's atomized us. And I think we have to fight against it. And we have to say, no, we are going to reach out and we're going to connect with some other people, and maybe find another couple who you feel at least a little bit close to, who you could reach out to and connect with. You know, one of the things that we know this from the teaching of Jesus in the Bible and from our own research, is that we weren't meant to do life on our own.
No.
And we weren't meant to do relationships on our own. We were meant to do them in community, wherever we can build that. So we have to reach out and connect with people and be brave, maybe, to share a little bit, to find out that we're actually not alone and we can connect and share this crazy journey we are in at the moment with other people. And for some of you, it may be that you need to go further than that. And it may be you need to be even more courageous, and you need to reach out and get professional help, perhaps for you as well. And if you do, then again, what we said before, there is truly no shame in anyone who feels like they need help in this season. But I think for many, many people, just reaching out in relationship to other couples, be a couple who are friends with other couples, that will build something that really does lift us a bit. And then I think finally, we have to be very practical and realistic. We're very limited in what we can do in this season often because of lockdown and all of that. But actually, we can be super practical and we can be very realistic, and we can sit together maybe and say, okay, what would be one or two things that are within our control that would make things a bit better? And it might go back to those rituals of connection. What rituals could we put in? It's quite interesting. This afternoon, I guess for many of us, we've looked out of our windows and the weather has been terrible for the last few days, hasn't it? Just shocking.
Yeah.
And today, in the afternoon, where we are anyway, near Watford, the sun came out only for about an hour. And so Juliet and I, we dropped what we were doing. We nipped out to a bit of green space near us and we walked in the sunshine with blue sky for about 30 minutes. And you know, it lifts your spirit. It just makes a difference. So I think we have to be practical. We have to say times are tough. And sometimes, you know, honestly, we have to say, what does it take to survive? Well, it takes some appreciation, finding small practical steps, looking for the positive rituals we can put in our life, how we can be kind to one another, to just put in place, in a way, very modest, small things that are doable, that you can do, but you know, they will really make a difference. And they will get you through this to a point where you've got more opportunity to meet other people, to connect, to get more help and do other things. Even in lockdown, we can reach out to people we know and form relationships in some way or another.
I think there's one other thing that you can do as well, because again, because we go into this black and white mode when we're feeling that desperate, what we lose sight of is the fact that some things are working well. Now, there may be very basic things. You may not be able to talk to each other very well, but you may be that you share the washing up. And actually that works well. You share the housework and that works well. Somebody does the cooking, somebody does the shopping. Actually, that's working well. Not everything in your life is a disaster as a couple. And actually, if you could look and list the things that are working well and actually say, I'm grateful for this, and talk about the things that are working well and saying, can we extend this? Can we make some more things work well? Can we move from hardly being able to say a civil word to each other to making sure we say please and thank you? And actually be really realistic about simple steps, small things that you can take to make your world a little bit better. At the same time, doing some of these things that Keith's been talking about reaching out, because we are meant, I mean, Kate talked about it last week, we're meant to have lots of connections as people. Our partner was never meant to be enough. Yeah. So, you know, we need that input.
Great.
So true. Thank you both. We're drawing things to a close. Like, there's no way we could deal with every single relationship challenge in the space of just 1 hour. But I'm so grateful. Before we close, I just remind people what's going to happen next week. Just give us a quick summary for those who love to kind of make some final bullet points. Give us some of these top tips that we talked about in summary form to close us out.
Okay.
So I think, first of all, this is not normal. What you're experiencing is not, or feeling is not unusual. So cut yourself some slack would be my first one.
I think the next one would be learn to communicate with each other at a deeper level, sharing your deeper thoughts and feelings.
And then focus on the positives and affirm each other in the things that you appreciate and that you see that are good.
I think be kind to each other with our thoughts and our words and our deeds. Be careful about what we think, what we say, and what we do.
And then work out these little daily rituals of connection, daily and weekly. Do some of these things so that you put structure in your day and in your week.
And then I think the next one is don't be on your own. Don't do this on your own. Reach out and find other people, other couples that you can share the journey with.
And the last one would be don't be afraid to ask for help. And you'll be surprised at the responses that you may get, because quite often the response that you'll get is something like, I'm so glad you said something. Actually, we're finding it really tough too and thought we were the only ones.
Yeah, great.
And again, to remind people, like, if you feel like you're needing help or support in any of the things we've talked about, as a church, like, we'd love to be there for you. If you go to our website, zeochurch.com/connect, and just leave your details with a bit of information, then we will follow up with you, because we would love to offer that support. And we know that lots of different people are watching. Some of you may be of a faith and some not, but hey, like, why not reach out and say a cheeky prayer that says, God, if you're really there, then could you help? You may be surprised at what happens in response. Give God a go. Maybe that's another part of your relationship toolkit. Well, Juliet and Keith, you guys have been so good. I could talk to you for hours, but we're going to bring things to a close. Thank you so much. I'll be back next week, same time, 7:30, live on youtube.com/CEOchurch. We've got Dr. Kate Middleton back, and she's going to be talking about the whole challenge around connection, isolation, and friendship. And how do we still feel in a lockdown moment and in COVID connected with people? How do we make friends? how do we grow those friendships so that we all feel that sense of we are known and needed by others, and we can be that for people too. So don't miss